Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jason Helen, Grundy County State's Attorney, and today is November 3rd, 2020, and it is Election Day. And I look forward to being reelected tonight. The results should be that I should beat Jeff Brown by more than 10% in this election. We have polling data to back that up, that over multiple times during this campaign, I maintained a very large lead with a lead in the double digits, and Jeff Brown had very little name ID. But going back to 2012, is that I was honored and privileged to be elected as Grundy County State's Attorney in 2012 when I beat John Bates by 2,100 votes. I ended up getting reelected in 2016 when I beat Brooke Shoup by more than 3,000 votes, and I won 36 out of 40 precincts in that particular election. And tonight, it's going to be a Republican wave in Grundy County. Is that I expect Donald Trump to be more than 60%. The polling data showed that I was leading by 17 points less than 2 weeks ago, and it just is a testament to the job that I've done in the last year. Is that we know in the last year that we've faced a lot of challenges just in the calendar year 2020 itself. Is that when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, is that the governor tried to extend his executive orders past 30 days, which under the Illinois Emergency Management Act, the governor does not have authority past 30 days. And that's when I had to take the leadership position of saying that we would not criminally prosecute the governor's executive orders. And that was a major thing. That was an article on May 7th that the Morris paper picked up. And that was a major thing, and it really cleared a path for people statewide to make a lot of decisions. One of the decisions that we had to make was working with the governor's team, working with our county board, and the elected officials in the General Assembly to get us out of the Northeast region, which treated Grundy County as if we were Cook County for mitigation purposes on COVID-19. So as we get into this pandemic, continuing with tomorrow about the whole situation with the bars and restaurants closing, is that there's going to be some litigation involving bars and restaurants. And the litigation up in Kane County last week is that a temporary restraining order was granted to prevent the health departments from shutting down bars and restaurants, because essentially the bars and restaurants stated this, is that governor proved to us that people are getting sick at the bar and restaurant, and then that they're spreading the virus to other people compared to other settings such as other businesses, big box stores, and other stores. And ultimately, the restraining order is granted. The Kane County restaurants were allowed to stay open, and that's going to be worked through the court system. And let me tell you one thing. Rob Hendrickson, stop trolling me. Rob Hendrickson last week threatened violence against me, has encouraged me to commit suicide, and has said he will also commit bodily injury on my wife. When Rob Hendrickson posts something, consider that. I'm being trolled by somebody big time, and that is a real person. So Rob Hendrickson last week was arrested for intimidation, which is essentially the extortion statute in the state of Illinois, that he's making threats to me. And he's currently out on bond. And any comment you make, Rob, is going to go to the special prosecutor's office for your sentencing. That's all I got to say to you about that. But with that being said, is that COVID-19, the pandemic, has been a real big challenge. Me saying we're not going to criminally enforce that executive order, that was one of the most difficult decisions I had to make of my 8 years of being state's attorney. And that was a very difficult decision. My opponent said nothing about it. He said I was playing politics about it, which I did the right thing. He's seen what I did in an emergency situation. I handled myself appropriately in that case. We also had the situation where my opponent said I was out of order for taking on the tax assessor for last year's assessment process in 2019, which was a very broken process, and I stood up for the tax. When you take a look at my record, sorry about that, I was getting a phone call, but when you take a look at my record over the last 8 years, it's a very favorable record. It's that I've been doing this for nearly 17 years. I successfully prosecuted the first murder case in the county in nearly 20 years when we just prosecuted Kasim Baker successfully for his second-degree murder conviction after nearly a 2-week jury trial, and that was about 2 months ago. So I look forward to looking at my record, resting on my accomplishments, and moving forward. And I've had a lot of accomplishments. The mental health court that I established in 2014 was the first mental health court that was ever established in the history of the county, where nonviolent, low-level offenders could get treatment and mental health services instead of incarceration. So when you take a look at everything that's going on, we're going to be victorious tonight. It's obvious that my campaign has been a very well-run campaign. When we sent out the tabloid at the end of September before the early voting, it listed all my accomplishments that had happened over the last 8 years. And my career is a history of accomplishments. Being the first person in my family to have a law degree was a big deal. To be the first person in my family to teach state and local government at the University of St. Francis for 7.5 years, that was a big deal, and I'm proud of my accomplishments there. I'm proud of my accomplishments in the community, whether it's been teaching basketball, coaching soccer, being on the Habitat for Humanity board for nearly a decade at this point, being president of a temporary domestic violence shelter, being on the Morris Cruise Night Committee, and having so many friends at the Morris Cruise Night Committee is that I'm happy of the job that I've done. And one of the biggest things that was just completely ridiculous in my opponent's campaign is that when you talk to everybody, all they did is trash, 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 trash. We showed you my resume 3 times at least, in an introductory letter, in a letter during the middle of the campaign, and a letter at the end of the campaign. If you're applying for a job, why don't you show the voters your resume? My opponent failed to show the voters his resume. He's not qualified for the position that he's applying for. He doesn't even know what it's for. And when you take a look at the WCSJ coverage of the candidates for him, that was obvious. So we look forward to getting past tonight. We look forward to getting some peace and tranquility. We look forward to having people not intimidate, bully, harass me online like Rob Hendrickson and get charged with making threats and telling people that I need to commit suicide, because that's the kind of stuff that my family's been up against. And that kind of stuff happens when you have an opponent that had a lot of troubles with reality and a lot of troubles with the truth. And when my opponent wanted to put out more than a dozen lies, of which we're able to prove were completely false, like a simple one was, he's the only resident running for Grundy County State's Attorney. And that was put out as fact. And it's just, when you run a campaign, when you just want to make stuff up and see what sounds good and put stuff out, and we had to rebut issue after issue, because if we didn't rebut the issues when they're put out, well, then they become true. And we rebutted all those issues. So when you take a look at everything that's been accomplished over the last 8 years, I look forward to earning your support, and we'll see what happens. But when you take a look at the results tonight, it's going to be a victory by at least 10%. So have a good day. Take care.